What's up, guys, and welcome back to Letterland, where it is always sunny and 75, and the open rates are always in the 80s. I'm Tyler, your Chief Newsletter Officer, and as always, I'm joined by Louis Nichols, aka That Newsletter Guy. So we got a busy show today, Louis. First up, we're bringing back Adam Ryan, our first recurring guest in episode 3. So that's great. He's got a big announcement for us. Sean Griffey, who is a legend of the newsletter game, he's going to shed some light on his biggest contrarian take to date. And then we have a whole bunch of headlines to unpack. But first, I want to get into today's subject line. You ready for it, Louis?
Hit me.
Is the media graveyard a gold mine? Are you opening
Oh,
it?
wow.
Yes or no?
Oh, I'm opening this 100%. What is the media graveyard? Is it a gold mine? Is there some way I can make money from this? This email is getting opened. I don't remember what we said last week's was, but this is I'm going 9.5 out of 10. No notes.
Wow, I like that. I think last week was a little bit lower. We should start keeping track of that. All right, I think we should get into it. You ready to go today?
Yeah, let's first maybe make some money. How are we doing that?
Yeah. Before we get into it, should we do a quick word from our sponsor, Sparkloop? You may
Please.
have heard of them, Louis. Over the past 3 years, Sparkloop has built up a network featuring thousands of the internet's top newsletters. I use it for both of my newsletters. I imagine you use it too, Louis. You can tap into this network to grow your own newsletter on autopilot with quality subscribers who read, click, and take action. Let me read that again. They read, click, and take action. The best part is that you only have to pay for engaged subscribers, which I don't know anybody else who guarantees that. Letterland viewers get a $200 credit to spend on growing their newsletters via Sparkloop. The way to do that is you email hunter@sparkloop.app to claim your credit. Tell them that Tyler and Louis sent you. You ready to get into the headlines today, Louis?
Let's do it. Yeah.
All right. So last week, probably the biggest headline was we had Substack's once and future media forum. I had to look up what that actually means. I think it's some reference to Camelot. But I guess our invite got lost in the mail. It was an invite only event in New York City. We were not there. A couple people called it the Substack Coachella, which I think was pretty cool. And it was exactly what you think it would be. It was a celebration of Substack's big creators, right? So we had Emily Sundberg interviewing TBPN. It was a big party. There was a really cool pool that you might have seen. It was plastered all over Twitter. And apparently there was supposed to be a James Brown impersonator who didn't show up. So it looks like they are putting that $100 million they raised to good use. But a lot of people are saying, this is them trying to say, hey, we're on the map. We're here to stay. But
because it hasn't all been positive, right? Like I like how you lead with the positive news, but there has been maybe some more, I don't want to say more interesting, but
James Brown did not show up.
Okay, you got the big drop, but like maybe did anything else happen in the Substack ecosystem this week? Like slightly less relevant, but still interesting?
Well, what do you got? It sounds like you have something for me.
Well, I mean, did you see the Business Insider interview?
I did.
I thought, yeah.
I didn't know if you were talking about something else. I thought you had something up your sleeve. But yeah, we had an interview with the co-founder, not us, Business Insider, interview with Hamish McKenzie, and there were a few things that I saw in there that I thought were interesting. Right. So first thing was they are building new tools, and so there's been a lot of chatter since the Ankler left, saying potentially that it outgrew the platform. It of course went to why am I blanking on the name? Went to another platform, another large platform.
Passport.
What is it?
Went to Passport, right?
Yes. So Hamish said that they built a metered paywall and analytics tools for the free press back in 2022, right? So that's almost 4 years ago now. And they said they are generalizing those tools now. So it'll be interesting to see if there are new tools coming. Last week, of course, we talked about Substack rolling out MCP. They also said they are, quote unquote, pretty close to fully rolling out a sponsorship marketplace. I don't know if this time it's different. They've said that for a while now, but Hamish claims that they recently started piloting the effort with select authors like Bill Bishop of Cynicism. And he said that the revenue split could be similar to the 10% cut Substack takes from subscriptions, which I think that was actually the biggest takeaway. You have any thoughts on this Substack news?
Well, I mean, I think the ad network is the big deal, right? Whatever they want to call it, sponsorship, marketplace, opportunities, partner, something, blah 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 blah. They'll find their own Substack spin to claim it's not just an ad network, but whatever
Right.
they do, oh boy, that's an interesting time for other ESPs and standalone ad networks. I especially if they do go with something similar to the 10% cut. Industry standard is 20% plus, and we have a big asterisk on how much of that that 80% actually gets paid out. I mean, we're going to talk about that a little bit later in the episode. Ad networks are not looking super healthy right now. Actually, Adam's going to give us some insights onto why he thinks that is too. So, yeah, I of all the things to watch, I think the this is the big one, the ad network one. What they do there over the next couple of months, I think, is really going to set the tone for where Substack goes over the next 2 or 3 years.
Cool. Uh, what else you got for us, Louis? I know you had a few things you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that stood out to me this week was a really cool new newsletter that launched. So Matt Gross and his team launched Shut Up and Eat, which is a niche newsletter. It's covering the restaurants, the chefs, and the hospitality space. Really fun, really interesting. I'm really excited to see what they do with that. It's really great branding, and yeah, I'm super excited to see where they go with it.
Yeah, it's interesting. We actually got last week we talked to, or 2 weeks ago we talked to Max Chayan, who's starting Caper. So it looks like there's a lot of movement in that restaurant and hospitality space, which is cool. But let's keep
Yeah.
the big announcements rolling. So we had, of course, the Shut Up and Eat, and then last week we talked about Kit's big June 11th product launch live stream. What they're teasing us with is your email list has been keeping a secret. And Louis, you're also keeping a secret. You won't tell me what it is, but hopefully we'll get it out of you with some torture or something. Then on Monday, we got a summer release event, hold the date, from Beehiiv, and that's incoming on July 16th. They are teasing us with the future in focus. And there's not much else in the invite, but I know that I'm analyzing this like Swifties analyze a message from her. So we'll see if I can figure something out. I'll let you guys know. But there are a few guesses from the peanut gallery. So we have Adam Garcia on LinkedIn wondering if it's a monetization upgrade or better growth tooling. That'd be cool. Monetization would be super interesting, especially given the Substack news. And then we have Cool Deep Singh over on Twitter. He's asking, is it SMS, right? So getting into text messaging. I think that could be a really big one. Louis, what is your guess here?
Wow. I mean, we looked at the winter strategy, the winter release, right, that they did. And we
Yep.
talked a little bit about that on the old podcast. And there was some big swings they were taking. And then it was a really weird mix of huge swing into like tiny feature of sort of quality of life upgrade where we were like, what? The platform doesn't have that? Yeah, that's crazy. They're 4 or 5 years old at this point. So I'm kind of expecting the same thing, right? They've raised a ton of money. They need to be competing with Substack. They need to gain relevance. They need to continue to be a plausible, have that momentum and energy that makes people want to move over there from other tools. So I am expecting them to come out with something, whether it's SMS, whether it's communities, whether it's educational, like a learning platform and stuff like that. They've got to keep expanding that way to become that one tool that does everything. They're too deep now to leave that behind. But I think we're also going to have to see that's great. That's going to get them more users. But at the same time, their existing customer base is not the absolute happiest in the world, right? Goodwill only extends so far when you're a mile wide and an inch deep, like they are on the product side. So they're going to have a lot of those sort of feature quality of life improvements as well. So I'd expect a very confusing blend of amazing, shiny new thing and sort of very boring, oh, wow, that didn't exist yet moments. It's kind of similar to the winter release, I guess.
Yeah, it sounds like you have something for us a little later. So stick around because we're going to get into that in the browser history section of the podcast. But I want to get into something else next really quickly before we bring Adam on. And this actually, kind of supports what he was telling us about last week. So Glue Letter, a data analytics tool, they analyze more than 105 million clicks across newsletters. And their findings were that 56% of all newsletter clicks were determined to be artificial, aka bots. And of course, that is super interesting. If you look at the distribution on the chart we're going to pull up here, there are certainly some things to look out for, or I would say some domains to look out for. But this is something that we talked about with Adam Ryan last week. We're going to talk about with him again right now, because he wants to tell us about the platform that he is building out over at Workweek that is helping combat this bot issue that B2B and all of us in the newsletter space have been dealing with for quite a long time. So Adam, if you want to pop in, we'd love to chat with you.
Good to see you again.
Welcome back. You are the first recurring guest, so congratulations. We are 3 episodes in. That says a lot about the newsletter industry.
I appreciate that, and the pleasure is mine.
Well, we certainly appreciate you coming back. It's really cool that you have a new release. It seems like it's the summer of releases. Now but you got to it first. So I want to hear a little bit more about what you guys are doing with the partner platform, which you announced yesterday. Unfortunately, we couldn't get the exclusive, but what's the elevator pitch on the partner platform you're building or built over at Workweek?
For years, newsletter advertising has been running on faith, and we're turning into a receipt is really the easiest way to think about that. And it's not just bots. When we think about bots and all of the reporting and the issues we talked about there last week, the inconsistencies, the different ESPs and the way they measure that, all of those things change the reporting factor. But most of all, I think particularly in B2B, which is really what the partner platform was built to solve for, if you have a 6-month, 12-month, or in some cases 3-year sales cycle, we know our creators influence and move the needle for those companies. We know that they have directly driven tens of millions of dollars of revenue and pipeline, and we're showing like an open rate and a click-through rate, and we're just as guilty of this as anyone else. And this is what we were doing for years, and we wanted to find a different and a better way to do that, where we could actually show the right influence and hold ourselves accountable to that. And ultimately, I think it creates a win-win-win ecosystem where the best creators can show what they're actually influencing. B2B marketers can finally show what newsletter the channel is doing for them. And for all the publishers in this space, it holds you accountable to make sure you're really investing in your content. And that's really what this is starting to do, and what we've seen the last 18 months in beta.
This is really cool. I mean, we're excited to dig into it a little bit in the next couple of minutes. What's like the reason that you guys were able to get to this either before everyone else, or why has no one else done this yet?
So it's really, there's 2 aspects. There's more of I would say an executional operational change, which is not easy. And it's moving away from open rates and click-through rates. They don't mean anything in my mind. They really have lost their value as a benchmark. If I was spending any money as a marketer and someone tried to pitch me that their newsletter was great because of their open rate, I wouldn't really listen to it. And so the first is the change of the pitch and getting away from that. And that's not easy to do. Open rates have been around since the late 90s. MailChimp has made them kind of the de facto. All the current platforms, Substack, Beehiiv, everyone pushes open rates as the thing. And so that's the first piece, is like you have to get away from that. And then the second one, though, is how do you prove that it works? And for us, we started to not show any clicks unless we knew who they were. So first we had to build our own click algorithm, which I've talked about, and we talked about this last week, which is by far more conservative, and you'll see that our open rates and click-through rates are relatively much lower than platforms because they're actually honest. But then the other part of that is, if we don't know who those people are, we don't show that click. And so the very first time we ever ran a campaign with somebody, I think we had 8 clicks. And that's a tough thing to deal with and to talk through. It motivated us. This was 2 years ago, almost at this point, to our communities. We now have had hundreds of thousands of applications to that, and it's allowed us to build an identity graph that allows us to attach personal emails, particularly to a company name. And that's a really challenging aspect to do this well. And at first we were at 20 or 30%. And then you have to worry about decay of data after 8-10 months. It's not fresh anymore. So how do you have that update? So that's what our team's been working on. That's why our data and engineering team is bigger than our content team at this point at Workweek. It's not an easy challenge to solve, but that's the real way that you're able to do this and why I think most people have it.
Yeah, and I saw that you managed to resolve, I think you said 80% or slightly over 80% of subscribers to a named person. How are you guys managing to do that?
Well, our communities are kind of the backbone of what enabled this, right? So we announced our communities in June of 2024. We started working on the partner platform in July of 2024. It was immediately the opportunity to start to recognize that we have insights and access around these applications, around the community. We have our own event registration tool, part of the community. So every event, not just that we host, but any of our community members host, they host it through our platform. All those are opportunities to refresh our data and to do that well. And that's really been what we've been working on over time. And now today, this week, we feel really excited that the benchmarks we've created around that data allow us to really roll this out publicly to everyone.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I'm going to put my selfish hat on here a little bit. So I see how this helps Workweek. I see how it helps your advertisers. But what about the rest of us? Is this something that you guys are planning to roll out to a broader audience?
Today we have no plans of doing that, but it's without a doubt built to improve the ecosystem. I've been selling ads my entire career. My dad has clicked on every ad I've ever sold, and he's a retiree barbecue competition judge in Missouri. He doesn't know what SaaS even means, and I included him in all my reports for 11 years. And
what's his email address? I could use some more clicks.
Yeah, exactly. Hit up Jim Ryan. And knowing by the demographic, it's probably at AOL. But there's something about that being funny and sweet as a parent, but also we know it's not making our industry better. And I have heard from so many people in the last 2 days being like, oh, man, we do that. I have my parents do that, or my wife does that, or we all know it exists. And so I think what we're looking at doing in the future is how could we bring the data and identity graph that we have and the opportunity and the trust from our advertisers to more people. And it's definitely something that we're thinking about.
And so I guess the answer is no, potentially not, no plans to roll it out now. Are there any takeaways of what you guys built over the, say past 18 months that, somebody could go and implement in their newsletter business today? Anything there?
Yeah. I mean, one, if you think you're doing well and the advertisers you work with are doing well, you probably are. And so I think, that's the feeling that we all have. We're like, we know that this is working.
Mm-hmm.
We just can't prove it. And so, deep down if something is working or if you're just arbitraging this kind of monetization opportunity. And so one, use your own instincts and work towards what you think is best and what you think is right. And that's what we started doing. Two is identity matters. We think that there's a future where we could probably help a lot of people with that, but you can start on your own, really start to understand who your subscribers are, and stop caring about how many you have, but start caring about who you have on that list. And that's been something that now why we've been so important with that saying is because if we don't know who you are, we don't count you at all in our reporting. So that's the other piece is care about who. And then lastly, recognize that the copy that you have matters. One of the coolest things that we've seen is we've seen one advertiser particularly had an absolute fail. It appeared to be a failure of a campaign, and it was a 6-figure plus campaign. And in their CRM, it drove no net new leads. It did not. There was nothing to show for it. It was pretty bad. And then we stopped looking at just that net new, and we started looking at closed lost opportunities. And we started seeing that the win back rate was incredibly high. And as we looked at the copy was super technical. It was not like, hey, do you have this problem? Come have a solution. It was like, if you kind of already knew the product, here's this technical description of this feature. And what we ended up seeing is that actually made closed lost customers come back and purchase. And so recognize that the copy you have matters, that if someone wants net new leads, make copy for that. If someone wants a win back campaign, make copy for that. It does work. Newsletter is the best channel for advertising for B2B. I believe that. And it's because of the copy that exists in those placements.
That's brilliant. Other than the copy, if I just sort of switch lanes and think about the brand side for a moment, I think I saw that you don't pass through like person level data through to brands, but you are sharing, I think, limited data about the company profile with sponsoring brands. How does this, like what you're releasing, how does it change sort of what brands should be doing after running a campaign with you?
Well, it's changing. We're matching our reporting to how our marketers are selling, right? How often do you be like, oh, guess what? We just sold Adam. It's like, no, you sold Workweek. And so our reporting is on a company and account level, just how our marketers are doing it. That's how we do the match. That's how we talk about Workweek as a whole now internally, is how many companies do we have? How many decision makers in those companies do we have per company? And so that's a little bit of the change there. That is, again, that's an operational change as much as anything with how you tell that story.
Nice. If people want to find out more about this, Adam, where can they go and take a look?
Advertising.workweek.com. And if you're a B2B marketer listening to this, we'd love to hear from you. But also, stay close if you're a B2B creator. We want to be able to support the very best creators to show the influence and trust that they've earned. And we think this is the very best way to do it.
Awesome. Adam, thank you so much for coming and sharing this. This is really exciting. Excited to see some innovation on the sponsorship side of the space. And I don't think we're going to have you back next week, but again, in the future for sure, sometime.
I loved being a recurring guest. Big fan of what you guys are doing. The industry needs it. And Sean coming up is the person that everyone actually should be listening to. So he's forgotten more B2B media than I've ever learned. So excited to continue watching after I jump off.
Awesome. Thanks, Adam. We'll have you back very soon.
Bye.
Cool. Tyler, I think we are moving on to some browser history, right? What has caught our eye this week? And I can jump in with one. So we talked last week in our headlines about how Beehiiv broke through the $30 million in annual recurring revenue mark very quickly, much faster than, I think, with the possible exception of Substack, any other newsletter platform in history. But we did notice in that announcement that there were a couple of concerns that maybe the big strategic bets they're making around the ad network and their Boosts marketplace, the revenue there doesn't seem to be growing comparably in the announcement that they had. And then on the back of that, I saw this post that hopefully we can pull up on the screen from Hunter, who is a really cool guy. He's a PhD in AI psychology. He runs a 50,000 plus subscriber newsletter on Beehiiv. And for a chill guy, he seems pretty ticked off. He ran an ad for an AI tool, should be super aligned with his audience in his newsletter. 50,000 subscribers. I think he has a 35% open rate. Okay, we now know from Adam and Glue Letter that we need to take that with a pinch of salt, but we know, we can assume that 10,000 plus people actually saw this, and it earned him $16. And the crazy part is Beehiiv told him he's actually outperforming the average. So that seems like a big shift. I've heard from people who did relatively well as far as ad networks go, which is never the top of the barrel. But that seems to be being parroted by others, seems to be a challenge that they're facing right now. Tyler, have you seen anything like this with your own newsletter on the water coolest?
So I've heard some of this anecdotally, of course, with the consulting clients I work across, some of them are kind of running some of this stuff. I mean, listen, I think this just points to the fact that if you're relying on cost per click to monetize your newsletter or build a business, you're kind of beholden to other people. And I think, truly, if you want to build an ad-supported business, which I actually don't even think is a great idea, you have to go out, build a sales team, and do it yourself, and do a lot of the stuff that, that Adam was literally just talking about, right? Like, go out and prove that you're actually providing value for the advertiser, whether that's sales of a widget, downloads of an app, or these B2B sales. And I would argue it's actually much easier on, on something that's, you can kind of click and, buy a download an app or something, right? There's a whole lot more attribution. So yeah, I mean, I've heard some of the issues. I think all these, these platforms go through their their growing pains, right? And maybe this has something to do with the summer release. They're kind of cracking down on some of the bad clicks. But we'll see. I think at the end of the day, though, listen, you gotta build your own sales team if you want to do the ad supported model. Like that's the only way it works in 2026.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And I think today we are going to be an equal opportunities bad news bear on the ESP front, right, Tyler? What's the next piece that caught your eye?
We are not just going to sit here and pick on Beehiiv. We will also pick on Substack. So this was a great one. Well, I guess not great, depending on how you look at it. From Brian Morrissey, a tweet that he put out last week, and of course he's a reporter from he started the rebooting, knows a ton about the media
Super
space.
smart guy.
Yeah, super well connected. I'm sure we'll have him on at some point. But basically, he said Substack is now app walling posts. And Hope DK Tomp, which is Derek Thompson, who has a massive Substack newsletter, gets a cut for working to build Substack's distribution and lock in. In my experience, landlords usually suck for tenants. Just to be clear, I believe that Brian just left Substack for Beehiiv. So, I don't know if there's anything to say for that, but this is a real issue. And I think we've worried about this with a bunch of moves that Substack has made. Is it, is Substack caring more about itself and locking you into the platform, or do they want to be kind of this free and open platform? And we've seen kind of, them talk out of both sides of their mouth a little bit. So super interesting. Any thoughts there, Louis?
Yeah, I mean, this could be an entire episode. We are going to have to do a deep dive on this at some point because I'm absolutely fascinated by this. I have a take. It's too long to explain, but I think what I will say on this right now is you always have a landlord when you're sending a newsletter. Right now, that landlord essentially is Gmail for the most part, with Apple and Yahoo sort of playing a secondary role, and they are getting very, very active at deciding what your readers see and what they don't see. The email is not an owned thing anymore in the way that it was two years ago, for sure. And I guess just to wrap up on that, I think it is interesting to see what Substack's doing. It is a walled garden. We do need to be careful. At some point, we need to have a conversation about whether Substack is acting purely in their own interests, or if they're maybe the first and the only people in the space who are really considering the consumer, the end reader in all of this, and how they want to consume content and the experience for them. And does that align with them also having a lock-in on publishers? Yes. But it's a challenge we're going to have to tackle. Like if we don't want the default to become Substack is just the Spotify for newsletters and you have to be on there, we are going to have a conversation very soon about caring more about the consumer than you do about your lock-in with your readers. Because if you don't care about the consumer experience, hey, Substack and soon others are very happy to do that. And you can sit there and whine all you want, but that's your own fault if you let them do that and care more about your audience than you do. Anyway,
you got a hot job alert. What is it?
Rant over. Yeah, exactly. Let's move on to more positive news. I saw this, and I think this is a really big deal. So Rosemary Graves was the head of growth at Axios until very recently, and she has just taken on the head of growth and marketing role now at the Bulwark. Is it Bulwark? I should have looked that up in advance. Anyway, that I think for me is a huge, huge, huge get, right? Axios is a really significant media brand. The Bulwark is growing fast, and it is newer. It is not on the map in the same way. So for me, that's super interesting. It shows they have real aspirations for growth. They got a huge get in Rosemary, and I'm really excited to see where she takes them in the future. This is definitely one to watch.
Yeah, it's cool to see, potentially more up and coming newsletters kind of poaching some of this talent. I really like this. Cool. Next up, I have something that I love, and I promise you, it's not just because it's about me. It's a little bit about me, but so Manny Reyes, a friend of the show who hasn't been on yet. I'm sure you guys will get to know him very well. He runs a great growth agency and an awesome newsletter all about growth. And one of the features that he does is he shows two great newsletter ad formats. And so what he did this week, he actually used a picture of me without my consent, but that's okay. And he used the water coolest my newsletter also without consent, but he'll probably hear from my lawyers. But I think it's a really cool ad format, to be using for if you're doing paid meta or, even if you're doing some organic stuff. So I feel like this is basically the equivalent of, a D2C fake podcast, when they're talking about the product, but there's actually not a real podcast around it. So basically it's Manny asking what my favorite newsletter is and me saying the water coolest. And I think it's really cool. I actually haven't seen any of this on my Instagram feed or anything. But I'll probably steal this one and send it to my guy who's doing some ads. But here's why Manny said that it works so well. The format mimics a real phone notification, like someone texting you a podcast recommendation. And I really like that. Anything that's going to make it into the group chat is something that's going to kind of stop the scroll. And then the other thing is like it's just short and sweet. I would add I'd I'd add that there's something psychological about the captions is that you actually have to stop and read them. So I don't know about you, Louis, but like when I'm watching Netflix, if we have the captions on, like I have to sit there and actually read those. I can't actually look at the image. So I think there's something about this format that is very, very cool.
Yeah, I think this is really cool. I like this. My one bugbear with this would be that I have the feeling when I look at that screenshot that there was probably someone who was slightly more attractive than both of those people sitting in the middle of that conversation who wasn't involved in it. So I have a little bit of a concern about that we are, we're brutally ad mogging some very interesting people who didn't get covered. But other than that, this looks great. I guess from there, I want to go to something that I saw, which was more of an inspirational thing, which is, we talk a lot about there being just too many newsletters, saturation, everyone is doing media. It's impossible to carve out a niche anymore. And you would think that Austin Reef, who started Morning Brew, 7, 8 years ago at this point, would be post media and would be one of the first people to say, yeah, this is done. But I loved this tweet that he brought up the other day. I think it's really true. I was thinking this through and going, okay, just take, for example, the newsletter space. Actually, don't. That's ours. Take something else. Take whatever it is. Even in like the software and the indie hacking space that I've been in the past, in marketing, in conversion optimization, in AEO, wherever you go, there are surprisingly few good media brands and niche media outlets that really cover it in detail in a way that you would actually be excited to be part of it and to be mentioned there. I think that is a huge opportunity, and I've seen a couple of people start doing this over the last 6 months, whether that's with podcasts, with YouTube, with newsletters, and they have grown some really significant businesses around just being literally the only game in town. So if you are on the fence and you're thinking about starting something new, Caper was a great example of that last week. I think we're going to see a lot more of this soon. It is a huge opportunity right now. And it is one of those things when there are already 3 or 4 good ones, becoming the 5th is going to be a challenge. But right now, this is a wide open space in most industries to come and take your pick. So yeah, I'm excited for this.
Yeah, I will say, I think the reason Austin, I get your sentiment. I think the reason Austin may have been asking this is because I know it seems like he's working on something new, and I think he wants to make the rounds on podcasts and newsletters. So there may have been something underlying here, but I think you bring up a good point that there's still a lot of opportunity in kind of the business world. Cool. I want to, speaking of great opportunities, this is just an awesome tweet I want to share from Pat at Starter Story. And I think Pat a little bit better than I do. But we all know that he recently sold to HubSpot, which is a really cool story. But I think few people really hear about the grind that goes into these sort of things. And, I've been there. Listen, I've been running a newsletter for, almost a decade now. And there was a long time where I was still working, my corporate job and doing a daily newsletter every day when I got home. So just looking at these numbers is pretty cool. So it's like the starter story of Starter Story sort of deal. So, kudos to Pat for building this thing up, sticking with it. And I think that's what a lot of people get wrong is they think that it's going to be, either an overnight success or they're going to know right away. And as we see here, it's like, just stick with it, man. If you think you have something really cool, just keep going. Live your dream.
Yeah, Pat is an inspiration. I remember we actually had a weekly sort of like mastermind with a few other people together. I think 7 or 8 years ago at this point. He was working on a couple of different things, but Starter Story was the one that he always came back to. Knew he was going to do really well with something. Was super inspirational to watch, and I'm there are a few people that I'm as happy for when they get a good exit as Pat. He definitely deserved this, and I'm loving what they're doing with HubSpot already, and it's going to be really exciting to watch them and the HubSpot team continue to build that out alongside the hustle and all the other stuff that they're doing. It's really cool. Yeah. I guess we have one more piece on the browser history before we get into our second guest, and this is actually from a section that we never have time to do on the on the live show because we always run out of time. So I'm sticking it in here instead. There is a really cool job alert. If you are interested in newsletter sales, I'm not being paid to say this yet, but I would love to be, Tom, if you want to. Tom Alder, who runs the insanely cool Strategy Breakdowns newsletter, he posted earlier that he's hiring someone to take over their sponsorship sales for the newsletter and for the podcast. And there are a bunch of sales jobs out there. Why I think this one is a huge deal in particular, if you want to break into newsletters and media and sort of skip a few years of being a junior, there are not many better opportunities than joining a media brand that has already got it figured out, that is selling sponsorships well. Brands really want to join them. The content is great, and you can just come in and execute. And yeah, you have to perform, but you are going to do really, really well. And I look at people like our friend Wouter, who did this at the Milk Road. And really, I mean, he skipped probably, I would say 5 or 6 years of his career just by being in the right place at the right time as a smart person. And I think this is another one of those opportunities. If you're interested in breaking into the space, doing some sales, this would be one of the top jobs that I would be looking at. I think it's a huge get.
Yeah, this is really cool. It's kind of funny that we put it right next to the Starter Story. Like, I could very much see a big exit if Tom from Strategy Breakdowns ever wanted to exit. Like, this would be right up HubSpot's alley. It seems like it'd be a great fit there. But yeah, it seems like a rocket ship that you could certainly climb on right now. So go apply to that. Again, we're not being paid, but I'd love a cut of that commission. Should Tom find someone because of Letterland Live.
Yeah. Well, I guess from that rocket ship, let's go to, I guess, what some people are calling the media graveyard. I've heard that term thrown around a little bit. We've been talking about the slow demise of pageview era media companies for, it feels like for decades now, but it can't be because it hasn't been that long. So it can only be a couple of years. But Austin Reef from Morning Brew, he brought this right back into the spotlight recently with this absolutely brutal tweet that we can hopefully get up on the screen about why they sold Morning Brew when they did. And it does feel right. Like, if you think about it, it feels like everyone is just talking about this continued decline of these companies. We've got AI eating search. Everyone's taking that for granted. But then I saw this post from Sean Griffey, founder and former CEO of Industry Dive, and I had to know more. I reached out to Sean. He agreed. Awesome to come share his take on this live. So Sean, thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully we can get you in here.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Yeah, Sean, thank you so much for joining us. Let's jump straight into it. Why do you think that page view media brands like BuzzFeed, Business Insider, we can go on and name some others, why are they in such sort of relatively weak positions today?
Well, I mean, I think I don't know, the original sin, I think, of that era, for me, kind of goes back a bit to programmatic advertising, right? And the slippery slope that you get down on it. There is a point with programmatic where you don't know who your customers are, and you don't get any feedback from them, and you don't care who they are. And that was seen as efficient and great by a lot of these companies. But what it sort of leads to is that it quickly becomes, I don't know who or care my audience is either, right? And so you can say, if I don't know my customers, I never hear from my customers that they're happy with my audience or that my audience is finding value. I don't care who my audience is. And so then you end up building something that in the time got big, but really didn't have much value on either side of the media equation, right? Like we all have two, for marketing and ad supported business, you have two customers, right? You have an audience and you have advertisers. And when you don't get feedback from either one of them, you end up finding yourself in a position where you have nothing.
Wow.
Yeah, I think that's the exact opposite of what we were just talking about with Adam Ryan, right? He's trying to collect as much data as possible and really get to know make it more about a one-to-one relationship with both the publishers, and the advertisers. So I want to get into one thing that you said. You called it your biggest contrarian take. So maybe a bit of that's a nice way of saying hot take, I think. So you said on LinkedIn last week that today would be an incredible time to run one of the page-view scale era media companies like Business Insider or Business Insider or BuzzFeed. What do you see as the big opportunity there that other people are missing?
Well, I think the best part of it is expectations have been reset. Right. When you see what Food 52 sold for in nothing, which I kind of like, wow, I'm kick myself. That would have been great because it sold for very little money. I'm not inside with Axel Springer, but they've had to reset what they think Business Insider is today relative to when they bought it. And BuzzFeed clearly, $20 million and a promise, gets you BuzzFeed. And so there's a to me, if you can remove the expectations of what early capital wanted those businesses to be and stop and say, what can these businesses be now? And it's going to be smaller, right? But it could be profitable. It could be more meaningful. It could be more important to the audience. And if you start with that, you have a great brand, in some of these, right? Business Insider is a little bit of drift, but it's not that people don't know it. And it's not that they don't have assets there. And so if you say, I'm going to start with, when we started Industry Dive, it was three of us in an old convenience store, and nothing. Like if you say, hey, Sean, start with the two of you in an old convenience store or start with Business Insider and build something, like it'd be much easier to start with Business Insider, much easier.
Yeah. Is there one of those, we threw up the graphic a couple of minutes ago. Is there one of those sort of page view era companies that you think has real promise or that you think would be like a really exciting challenge? What's like, if you had to be parachuted into one of them, which one would you go for?
Well, honestly, there's two businesses that I think are just in really interesting spots, neither on this list right now. But like I said, we mentioned Business Insider. I think they have ambitious owners. And I think, there's Axel Springer, polarizing to some people, but I look at them as a company that cares about journalism and is very ambitious. And I think that's a recipe to do something really well. And so I think that one would be exciting if I were there. The other one that's not really a page view era media, but it's a bit of a struggle now is the Washington Post. And I'm a DC native and I grew up with the Post. And so I count myself in the fan category and want it to be great. And the one thing about the Washington Post is there are a lot of people who want it to be great and are maybe disappointed that it hasn't been great, but want it to be great. And I think if you can start with that, you can really do something cool.
So Sean, is this your way of telling us? I know the Business Insider CEO just left. Are you going to be applying for one of these jobs?
I don't think so. I don't think so. And I don't know if they want the B2B guys. Like I think the consumer people tend to shop from the consumer pools and go there. But I think, some of these businesses, what we're seeing now in media is people going to niche markets, people serving audiences deeper. I mean, that's the B2B playbook. So I think these guys would be, smart to look at it. And honestly, you look at what Axel did with Morning Brew, right? They brought in Robert Dipple, who is just a really brilliant guy, but he's one that can run the B2B playbook in there. And you hear their earnings report the other day. One of the only companies they mentioned doing really well was Morning Brew. And I look at that, I'm like, I'm not surprised, because they brought in someone who really kind of knows what this era media is about.
Okay, so let's assume you are going to take the BI role. You're not, but if you did, what's the first thing that you would do if you were parachuted in?
Well, I mean, I think if you look at any media company, and Business Insider, in particular, I mean, the first thing I want to do is, probably what Adam talks about, like, what first party data do we have? That's the first thing. You have to look at all these businesses and say, who is our audience? What do we know about them? And how do we think about them as cohorts? And how do we serve those people? And then I would really want to understand how Business Insider thinks about different cohorts and think about their audiences there. Because right now, I mean, candidly, not to throw stones, but it's a little disjointed when you look at the nav, right? The navigation, I looked at the other day, and it has business, which you'd expect, but then it has military and defense as a top line navigation, and then it has games. And that just feels like, okay, who are we? Who is our audience there, if that's what we're trying to do? And I would think about how we define it. And then really, not we care about people who care about their careers or business, but something more deeper, right? In the industry dive world, we always looked at our audience and we'd say it's not, a retail dive publication wasn't writing for the retail industry. We're writing for these job titles within the industry, right? And so what's the Business Insider equivalent of the job title that we want for these folks? And I think if you can set that up and sort of focus it, then you have a chance to be really meaningful to those people.
It's interesting. We talk a lot in this space when we think about sort of newer media brands that are still starting. A big concern that a lot of people have at the moment is obviously AI eating search. But it feels like when I look at, and I could be completely off base on this, but I look at BI and I look at BuzzFeed, I see a company that has had sort of the wrong incentives in a way for a long time, because there have been things they've been able to do that drive page views, that will drive programmatic revenue, because they know they can show up in the search results and they will get those impressions. And it feels like now, sort of with that opportunity going, that's almost in some ways a positive for that kind of company, because it means they can focus on what's more important, on the existing audience they have, and understanding who they are, and building maybe a more valuable business around those people.
I think you're spot on. I mean, I think that's part of the opportunity, part of the reset of expectations. I think the trap, the trap that everyone has to, stay away from is we viewed SEO not as an audience channel, but as a foundational strategy, right? It was a business strategy, not a channel. And if you look at SEO or web traffic or GEO, whatever it's going to become, as an audience channel that's just the same as Instagram or LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever, and you put it in that box and say, this isn't what we're building our business around. This is something our audience's teams are going to spend time on, but is not going to be what we measure the business on. I think you can come up with something, that's more sustainable.
Yeah, that's amazing. What do you think about like the cultural aspect of this as well inside of those companies? I mean, it's I run a very, very small company compared to those ones, and making a strategy shift of that size would be a challenge, right? How do you get people on board for that?
Yeah, I don't think there's any easy way to do that other than to go in there and be really upfront and clear about what you're trying to do. Again, this is a little bit about the reset expectations. And, the one thing about a lot of these businesses is that they've gone through a tremendous amount of turmoil right now. And so I think if you can kind of come in there and be clear and be a straight shooter with folks and have a real direction to go to, hopefully you can get people to buy in. But there's certainly listen, anytime someone comes in from the outside, you've got a cultural challenge, and you've got to respect the culture that's there, and you've got to respect the people and the effort. And it's really easy for me to sit on the outside and say, here's what I do, without knowing anything that they've done, and what's going on there. I mean, these businesses have been filled with smart people. That's not been the problem, right? It's been a little misaligned incentives and timelines and some strategies, but it's not the talent isn't the problem. It's not the people problem. So if you go in there and you try to change the culture, I think you've got to really understand what the culture is before, because it may be stronger than you think.
Yeah, I want to just close it out with one last question. How we keep on Business Insider. Two things really well are certainly newsletters and events. How are you using those to turn around that sort of business?
Oh, I think it has to be a part of it. Honestly, my biggest complaint with BuzzFeed for a decade was that you'd go to their site and they weren't hammering you to join newsletters. It was like really hard. I was like, God, why wasn't BuzzFeed the owner of The Skim and Morning Brew? Why weren't they building those themselves 5 years ago when they had this fire hose, right? And so I think that's an important part of those businesses. I think where I'd really sort of lean into is think about community. And I think events are a part of community. Newsletters can be part of community, but how do we get the people there to feel connected to the brands, right? And I think if you look at the enduring media brands that, or even the ones that capture people's zeitgeist, it's people feel connected to them, right? That's a lot of the creator world right now. It's not, to me, it's not creators that are important. It's not the term creator, it's the connection you have with them that's really important. And I think you have to lean into how do we build connection within those audience so they feel connected to us as a brand. Whereas, candidly, my instinct, like I grew up in a media era where it was you talked at your audience with authority, right? And that's sort of shifted today. And we now have to think, how do we do that? And when you talk with authority and you start to scale, you scale for efficiency. And, I spend a lot of my time thinking now, what does scaling for connection mean? If AI makes us much more efficient, how do we turn all of those efficiencies into tools for connectiveness? And I think that's like the real challenge for all of us. And I think that where the creators win is they're just naturally positioned not to scale for efficiency. They're naturally positioned for connection. But that doesn't mean big companies can't do it.
Yeah. It's really interesting to see some companies now are employing more sort of like hybrid strategies, right? Like you have Yahoo, like investing very heavily into creator-led stuff. They have the audience, they have the reach. They're bringing in people who can build that connection with their audience on a person-to-person level. You were mentioning, Morning Brew being the standout in the BI Axel Springer sort of stable. Also, the only one of their properties I can think of where I know the names of the people of whom I'm consuming the content. So it's a really interesting one to see. I wonder if you think we'll see more of that kind of thing in the future.
Yeah, and I think Axios took off because they put the people that write Axios front and center, and people feel connected with their newsletters, right? I mean, you can say who writes the newsletters you read at Axios, and that was 100% their strategy, but people still feel like they're a part of Axios and they're a fan of Axios despite that, right? And I think the Atlantic's, done a good job with that with some of the people they brought over. So I think there's ways to have your cake and eat it too as a larger company, but you've got to be deliberate about it.
Brilliant. Any predictions on where these page view era companies are going to be going over the next year or two? If we were to bring you back, which we would love to, we'll see whether you have the time in 2 years. You may be in a new CEO role.
I can predict that's probably not the case. But,
okay, that prediction aside, yeah. Anything you're expecting to see?
Well, I certainly think some of these will be gone, right? Like I don't think some of them are going to turn, or they're, some of them are already kind of going into the zombies. How do we milk these out? Kind of titles. But I actually think that there's going to be a handful of these that we're going to see a revitalization of. Like something like Food 52, which is on that list. I think could come back. Like, I think that there are people that could connect with it. The interesting thing is that, it's at America's Test Kitchen now, which already has its own brand. So I'm not sure if they're going to be interested in building two brands, with it, or if they're going to try to combine this some way to build an audience. But I think as a standalone, that one, I think, could have come back. Obviously, Business Insider, I think, has a real strong chance given the ownership and the patience they have. I don't know about some of the other ones, but they could be great.
Brilliant. Sean, thank you so much for joining us and sharing this with us. It's been super insightful. Really great to have you on. If you're watching and you don't already follow Sean, he's a great follow, especially on LinkedIn. Sean, thank you so much.
Thank you. Really appreciate you guys having me.
Anytime.
Bye.
Man, he's awesome.
And yeah, that was awesome. And I think on episode number 3, after going badly over on the first 2 and having to cut a lot of sections, have managed to finish not only on time, but with 4 minutes to spare. So Tyler, do you want to sing the secret Letterland song, or are we going to close it out 2 minutes early today?
Yeah, we'll just sit here and stare blankly. We got to get our money's worth out of this episode. But yeah, no,
maybe there's somewhere you can direct people who are really interested in maybe daily updates in a written format electronically about the newsletter and new media space. Is there somewhere that they should be?
Yeah, we're all about live shows and podcasting. I don't know if there would be a better medium to potentially do that. Yeah, you should go check out letterland.live. That is where we have some cool stuff for you, but also we have a newsletter that we're going to start sending out. I think probably this week or next week. We're getting there on that, but it's going to cover, again, a daily newsletter, going to cover off all the things that you need to know that are happening, from thought leadership to headlines in the newsletter space. So you can follow along all week and then join us live every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern time. But we appreciate you guys joining us in Letterland, where it's always 75 and sunny and the open rates are in the 80s. Louis, got anything else for the people?
No, that's all. I'll see you all next week. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, guys.